tax, I guess, on people that own 26 to 100 properties.
And we're supposed to trust the local government to take that extra 3%, put it in some bank account, open up a grant system, and offer that money to other first-time home buyers as some sort of like down payment assistance. Like, yeah, right.
Yeah, basically. Big red flag.
That's another thing that the real estate heavyweights could offer as a service. You know, we a little bit heavier. We could just walk pier and beam houses and just like, hey,
it's going to be squishy for us.
You may, Miss Johnson, 115 pounds. You may not realize it, but that floor is a little soft.
You are now listening to the Real Estate Heavyweights Podcast.
You see this guy here staring back at you? That's your toughest opponent. Every time you get into the ring, that's who you're going against. I believe that in boxing, and I do believe that in life.
Your weekly deep dive into DFW real estate, life, and beyond. With your hosts, Tavis Westbrook and Ashton Hines.
Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights Podcast. As I am already saying hello, and then I'm looking to make sure I'm recording on the right mic, and so is Tavis. So we've had a few technical difficulties in the last couple podcasts, and you know, it's one of those things. You got these checklists, like, okay, is this right? Is this right? I'm getting more used to it, but sometimes I just start going. So. I am Ashton Hines, half of the Real Estate Heavyweights. I am a physical therapist assistant, full-time running around town. I'm also a realtor. I've got a goal of this year doing 100 open houses. So a lot of my social media lately is me going to open houses. And I also invest. Recently, I finished my flip number 4. That flip I bought from one Tavis Westbrook, a real estate friend, mentor, guru here in the Dallas area. He's done over 200 flips. He's got commercial, he's got midterm rentals, long-term rentals, and he's here with us, the other half of the Real Estate Heavyweights. What's going on, Tavis?
Hey, good morning. I am at the other side of the heavyweight podcast here, the heavier side, mind you.
I don't know, man. You are doing a good job. You are sliding down the scale. The last couple of times I've seen you, I could definitely tell a difference, and I have been creeping up, so I got to get on the ball here.
It's been good. Back in the gym, back in the routine. You know, feels good. Put it all back together. Unfortunately, I think my dogs are getting neglected. They're looking at me every morning like, why aren't we going on that walk? You know, when I'm running out the door to go to the gym. So
right. Well, maybe they can.
I gotta make time for both, right? I got to do the 2-a-days and at least
do 2 a day
on the walk. Yeah.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, the last couple of times we've talked about, you know, Tavis has got some midterm rentals that he's been renting out. I assume those have all been rented, and you're just kind of hoping that they settle in and there's no big issues after they get started at their place.
Yeah, everybody's happy right now. I've got one in Richardson becoming available here towards the end of the month, and I've been getting quite a bit of inquiries on it, but nothing's really sticking so far. So, you know, as we've talked before and as you guys have witnessed, you know, that can change in a matter of, you know, 30 minutes to an hour sometimes on getting somebody. So the good news is that one has actually been booked most of the year through the Airbnb platform. So we, you know, register now as a, you know, super host, and that property shows up as a, you know, a guest favorite and all of that. So
that's great. Nice.
Yeah.
How's the flip going over in Wiley? You've been posting some videos. Looks like the guys are making really, really good progress over there.
Yeah, they're doing well. I was just on the phone here a little while ago with the guy that's going to do some trim work and hardware work, and he was trying to, you know, he's kind of a new guy that I'm trying out, and he was pushing back a little bit on my rules about no shoes on the carpet, and you know, that was going to be hard to relay to his guys, you know, because he didn't have booties and he's going to have to get booties for them. I said, tell them to take their damn shoes off. It's fine.
Right.
And he's like, you know, we need to do it fast. And I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to, do you want me to come after you after they, you know, get mud all over the carpet? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So just follow the rules, man. So
yeah, I know you taught me that. Put the signs up, make sure everybody knows.
I've learned the hard way.
I caught myself. Yeah. When I caught myself, you know, I would run over there for 5 minutes and then I would keep my shoes on. Inevitably, I'm in there, and then one of the subs would walk in. I'm like, dang it.
Yeah.
I'm walking around the house. Fortunately, at Mapleton, it was all wood floors and tile, but you still don't want to scratch things up. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you just lay the rules down, everyone kind of, and this is a newer guy for you. Most of your guys have worked for you for long enough. They just kind of know the system, and yeah. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Or, you'll have to come back and say, look, that front carpet is no bueno. So
we're good, man. We got stagers teed up. She's on schedule. I told her maybe end of the next week, I need to get the cleaning crew in there. I've got a window crew. I hired a separate window cleaning crew that I've been very happy with in the past. They've done my commercial building. They've done my personal house, once a year, they come to my personal home. Yeah. And they do an amazing job, and they're very affordable.
Yeah, I need their number.
Man,
I need their number. That's a mess. It's a mess out there.
But, this house is a giant 2-story. And so I'm like, there's no way I can expect my cleaning crew. Normally I get the cleaning crew to handle the windows at the same time, but this house has a lot of glass, and it's 2 stories, and the ceilings are 19 feet throughout the majority of the house. And I was just like, I need to just separate this, get a cleaning crew out, do the windows, and then have the cleaning crew just focused on the rest of the house. So it'll be more efficient that way.
Well, good deal. Well, I've been working over in Richardson to try to get that house sold, or we have a contract on a house. Our investor friend now, Aaron, he put an offer on a house over in Richardson. We went back and forth. I think he got a good deal on it. We were hoping to get it for a little cheaper. Tavis and I were kind of pushing from more of the investor side of, hey, Tavis happened to know how much the house next door had sold to an investor in the previous year. And so we had some inside knowledge of like, look, the offer we gave is not an investor offer. And I think the homeowners were sort of interpreting it as like, look, you're trying to take advantage of us and make money, and we're just trying to get out of this. And like, no, actually a real investor offer was made on the house next to you. And it was about, $200,000 less than what we're offering. So I think we're going to talk about this later in the show. It's just, sellers' expectations and some of the things that they miss on valuation. And because Tavis and I walked a potential purchase over in a similar neighborhood, actually, Canyon Creek in Richardson. And, after we walked and we looked at it, and I guess Tavis gave the number, the seller's, idea of what they were supposed to get out of it was just far and away above what probably is realistic, but I'm sure that happens a lot. So we're going to try to dive into some of that. But the Richardson house, it's going well. We're through the option period. We had asked for a lot of things on the option period, and they said, no, thank you. And so Aaron is really excited about the house, and Tavis, I think, is going to get to do the design work over there. And so that's going to be cool. Getting to work with Tavis there kind of on a different relationship. I'm representing the buyer, and he's going to turn it into a really neat midterm rental. And we met with the interior designer that he's going to use, that he has a relationship with. And so Tavis is going to be doing that. So I think that'll be a fun project, hopefully coming up soon.
Yeah. And I think it'll be cool. I'm excited to tackle that one. And he's a pretty easygoing, visionary based client. I think, obviously one of your easiest traditional clients you've ever dealt with.
Yes.
And because I think, the advice and opinion coming from us were pretty strong to try to negotiate this thing down based on the findings. And he was just, hindsight was like, no, I want it. What do we have to do to keep it? And
so, he's looking at the big picture, and he's got a vision for building, a portfolio of these things, and he's in it for the long game. And so he doesn't want to take huge losses on any one thing, obviously, but he's going to hold this house for a long time. And so, instead of trying to get it down in, let's say, another $25,000 before the purchase, he's looking at it. I'm going to have it for 10 years.
He's betting on the rapid appreciation for this area. And that's understandable. That is true. It just also, there's those other elements, right, that we were trying to kind of, coach him through, that it lacks some wow factors, and so, and it lacks some architectural things that we couldn't change. So, right. I think, but we're going to be able to design it. I think by the time it's done and we open up the kitchen, you do your thing, and the designer, I think the vision for it is awesome. And it was, some of these things that we found on the inspection, like big things, like we're going to have to replace the suet, the cast iron. The pool had some pretty serious problems, and it's like, we're going to have to fix these regardless. And so we're trying to get some concession there. But at the end of the day,
he's super excited about it. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to look awesome when it's done. The neighborhood, I actually really sold the neighborhood for him because we were looking at a different part of town. I mean, man, this Canyon Creek is really great. And I think the more time you spend over there, Canyon Creek area is just really, really cool in Richardson. And so I could definitely see myself living over there at some point. It just has a neat feel. And so I think once he puts his touch on it and it's a part of that neighborhood that's kind of turning over, it's going to do really well as a midterm because the radius of the feeder, the families that could use that as a midterm, I think are going to be really cool. So, well, that's what I got going. Tons of open houses. I got one more booked for this weekend. I'm looking to pick up another one. I'm comping a ton of houses for investors. I sent 5 properties to an investor yesterday to look at as possible purchases for rentals. I think they would actually make really good on-market rentals if we made a decent offer, but the numbers pencil. So just trying to make some stuff happen and just trying to stay busy. So why don't we do a little bit of a market update? So the Dallas market, similar. It's overall 41 days on the market. It's definitely gone up over the last month or two. Things are sitting a little bit longer, and especially depending on which county you're in. Collin County seems to be, on the higher end of things as far as the average goes. One interesting statistic I did see is that between December and January, we added 3,500 active listings. And that actually is almost to the number exactly what we went up last year. So from December to January last year, it went up 3,500. And so this is just the time of year. November, December is a little slow. And then people start picking up in the spring. They start wanting to kind of make things happen. My open houses this last weekend, I had 9 groups come through Saturday, 9 groups come through Sunday, completely different areas of town, completely different price points. So hopefully the activity is picking up soon. And maybe by the time you get your Wiley house on the market ready to go, you'll get really good activity and maybe get some multiple offers. So what's your timing over there, you think?
Probably 2 weeks, week and a half, 2 weeks out from going on the market. So I've been watching it, and there's really not a lot of inventory over there at all. So yeah, I'm excited to get it out there. And the other cool thing with that particular property is this was just the right convenient deal. I mean, typically, I think getting a flip in this area, unless it's like some kind of major damage, right? Fire, flood, something like that. I think it's kind of rare to get into an opportunity because these homes were built in the early 2000s, like 2002 build. And they're big homes and the price points are higher. So I just don't think there's a lot of typical opportunity for investors in this pocket. Mm-hmm. As much as I would like to do another one over there. But when you start looking, and it's mind-boggling to me because I got licensed in 2004. So to me, looking at a 2002 build, it's like, oh, it's a new house. And, and we look at it, it's a 20-year-old house, right? So yeah, they're dated. And so now looking at comps and everything, it makes me feel good because most of them are all dated and more of the old world or traditional finish out. And so, of course, being able to update it and do, new paint schemes and design trends of today's, 2024 market, we should do well. I think it's going to be super attractive. The other thing is there's some new builds in the area that are about $100,000 higher in price point than where we're going to be. And they're smaller and they're just really plain and simple. I mean, they're builder grade stuff, just very basic, like this house was originally. And but it's whites and grays and just kind of simplistic. So it'll be cool. I mean, again, we talked about this before, and I'm seeing this a lot with competition right now. Other flippers, and I just wish I could tell them like it's worth spending the money to stage it. Like, I mean, I think that the first quote I got was about $3,200, and that was including doing the game room. I think my budget was $3,000, but I think I'm going to pull the game room out of it and just do the downstairs because the game room's a game room. I mean, somebody can visualize and see what that can be, but it's worth it, right?
Staging,
I mean,
just crazy.
I just think it's well worth it. You price it right, you stage it. It just takes any of that guesswork out of it. It's going to put it together. I mean, it's the same reason that builders make a model home and spend the money on the model home to walk you through, and then you go walk a spec build and you're like, oh, it's the same house, same floor plan. Oh, okay. It's not nearly as sexy,
different vibe. Yeah. It's interesting. Actually, the open house I did on this last Saturday, it was a 1997 house, but so many people commented on how well they had kept it up, and they had just spent money through the years. They had been there the whole time, really upgrading and doing it in a way that has paid off in kind of the neutral, higher end neutral. They had really good marble and like really good tile that just isn't super trendy one way or the other. It just aged really well, and it also fit the style of the house. It was kind of it was transitional, leaning more traditional. But their furniture they lived there still, and they had good style, and they had drapes, and like it just all worked. And so anytime people walk through, it was on a little bit of a higher end for the neighborhood, but no one complained about the price because it just felt right, and they had done such a great job. Compare that. I've got another client looking right now on the higher end of things, and he wants 2000 or before, or 2000 or newer. Well, there's a lot of houses in that realm, especially if you're looking at a 5,000, 6,000 square foot house, to do even just a sort of a lipstick remodel to that. I mean, you're dropping serious money, and a lot of these people have not. And you got the old school, just wrought iron banisters and old school wood and tons of trim. And it's just does not feel updated, but technically it is 2000 plus. And so it's finding that combo of someone who's actually put some money into it, or maybe they just made really good choices a long time ago and it's aged well is super tough. So market tip of the week, like always, stage your freaking house. It's $2,500 to $3,000. Stage your house, get professional pictures. You will really, really do much better. So why don't we touch on a little bit of news?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official.
There's good news and bad news.
This is a massive story. Who wouldn't publish it?
We landed on the moon!
Man, I've got certain information, all right? Certain things have come to light.
And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
A couple things. Well, we'll touch on three quick articles here. The big one for Tavis and I, we work for Keller Williams, and we've touched on it multiple times. There's been some national class action lawsuits. Some of them have been going for several years. A few of the smaller ones really came to a head earlier this year. They started to settle. Some of the big brokerages decided to settle. Well, finally, Keller Williams has settled one of these, I think, for $70 million. And they have agreed in principle, very similar to some of the other brokerages, to change some of their education to also not require that agents put a buyer's commission on their listings. And they're also not requiring their agents to join the National Association of Realtors. So, what that looks like day to day, right now, it's not different. But I think, the more these get settled, the more they get adjudicated on these different class action suits that are still going, even bigger suits, more national suits. It's inevitable that things are going to shift. Maybe it's anecdotal. Maybe it's like seeing the yellow Ferrari around town. All of a sudden you see them everywhere. If you start paying attention, it's like, I've started seeing more and more 2.5% listings on the buyer side. I've been really staring at the MLS a lot, and I don't know if maybe it's always been there and I just haven't seen it. But to me, I know Open Door and those guys, they do it, but there's more, traditional brokers, I feel like, are offering some of that. So maybe it's going that way, or maybe it's been like that the whole time, but we'll see. Have you heard anything from Keller Williams? I've tried to read what they put out, but is that basically your understanding of what Keller Williams decided to do?
Yeah. I think, the good news is he kind of waited it out, right? And a lot of these other people were settling beforehand. So I think it was more of a strategic move to wait it out and then settle. And even though, $77 million is a huge chunk of money, and mind you, KW is, I forget exactly where we rank now, but we're definitely in the top two internationally from a privately owned, non-public, real estate company. Mm-hmm. So I think he, made the right move, and ultimately, I think the settlement was a good thing, and we appreciate, what Gary did and his approach, in that. I haven't seen a lot of the backlash yet to kind of just see what the changes are going to be made, and it'd be interesting, kind of the whole not having to be part of the National Association of Realtors, because that's always kind of been a thing. And it was more about the fact that, as a NAR member, you're held to a higher standard as a realtor. And, that's also how you gain access to MLS and, all these different tools. And so anybody that was a part of Keller Williams before had to belong to that network, right? We had to belong to the National Association of Realtors. And there's fees and quarterly fees and annual fees and everything that are part of that association. So that'll be interesting to kind of see what happens with that and how that is interpreted, because again, it's all about code of ethics and all these different things that kind of make us held to a higher standard. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens with that.
Yeah, and if anything else, I think it's on them to really come through as an education piece and say, this is the value proposition of being a member of us. It's not just this expectation of you just have to do it. If you want to call yourself a realtor, you have to be a member. And I've never even thought about well, what does this even mean for me? You're just a realtor and you have these code of ethics. But, for me mentally, I don't really know what differentiates their code of ethics versus the Keller Williams versus Texas State, Trek and all that stuff. It's like, I just act a certain way, So I think education on their piece, on their part, I'm sure they do a lot of lobbying and all that stuff, but yeah, it'll be good. They're falling apart, so they need to do something. Their PR team needs to do something because they're losing executives, they're losing membership. And so if they want to have any sort of say in, the national movement of real estate, I think they're going to have to do something quickly because I don't think they've settled actually on any of these, and they could get hammered from an entity standpoint and a financial standpoint. It might really, really impact their ability to do business. So, well, another article that came out, I don't know all the statistics. I just was floored by the number, but Fox News Business had an article that they did a special, and they said 1 in 20 transactions for real estate on the buyer seller side resulted in some sort of fraud, specifically wire fraud. And this is interesting because Aaron, when he was trying to wire his earnest and option money to the title company the other day, they're based in Denton. He lives in Frisco. He's like, man, I don't necessarily want to drive over there. So they're figuring out this wire stuff. Well, there's all sorts of things you have to sign off on, and we will never do this. And this is how we present it to you. And then this article popped up. I'm like, well, I guess there's the reason right there. I guess it's very sophisticated. It looks very real. A lot of times, somehow they know you're in the middle of a transaction, and they'll send you an email that looks just like your title company and says, hey, by the way, wire the money here. And you do it and you show up to closing and they're like, hey, when are you going to wire that money? And they say, I did it yesterday, and so fortunately it seems like a lot of the banks are on board with trying to make it right and giving you your money back if they can prove hey, this is what I did. But man, that's kind of scary. 1 in 20 to know how many transactions are happening. We've got 11,000 active listings right now on the DFW MLS. It's like, man, that is quite the number. That's not anything you've ever personally had to deal with, is it, Tavis?
No. Years ago, we had a situation happen, and I can't remember the dynamic of it. I remember something happening. Mind you, this had to be 10 years ago, but I remember something happening, and I don't remember if it was specifically on our deal or if it was another deal, but it was, it basically, it's like what they said, somebody hacked into the email and said, send the wire. And then, the wire was sent and it was basically disappeared. And, they had to track it back and figure out where it went and what happened to it and all that and get it figured out, and I think, there was some kind of insurance or something that, that played a part, but no, it happens. And you see these disclosures all over, title companies' emails and bank emails, for instance. And sometimes it's frustrating. When I email back and forth with my banker, it's frustrating to me because I get this encrypted, email back. And it's sometimes just a very simple question. And it's I get an email back with this encrypted message, log in here, password. I'm like, I don't know my password. I'm just trying to read this stupid email. And there may not be any, valid information that's being passed and forth. But I mean, ultimately, I'm glad they do it. And then there's a reason, right? Because these cyber hackers are geniuses at this stuff. And once that money moves around, it just disappears. So, there was there was an issue with a big title company. One of the larger firms a few weeks, I think in December, Fidelity, which is actually like the underwriter for multiple other entities that do title as well. And they had a crazy security breach and kind of shut their stuff down for a few weeks. And I think they got it worked out. I don't remember ever hearing, what the negatives were. But anyways, it's a real thing. So it's just very important. The one thing you'll see in the emails is just never send wiring instructions over email. They'll call and verify, and stuff like that. So just very
That's why
important.
I go into the lobby. I go into the lobby a lot. And they're about to open up a Frost little mini lobby right around the corner from my house.
They just did that up the road from me, and I went in there yesterday for the first time in a little bitty Frost store.
Yeah.
And got cash out for one of my contractors that wanted cash this week for whatever reason, and it's not normally a situation, but it's like, okay, you scratch mine, I'll scratch yours, and let me do this. But then I started thinking in my head after I pulled this cash out, and because there's that thing going now where people are watching you go into banks and get cash, and so people are leaving cash in their car. Don't do that, by the way. If you're going to get cash, keep it on you, on your person. And another thing they said is don't go from the bank, and get cash and go directly home. I made that mistake. I didn't think about it till I got home. And then I'm like looking around like, did anyone follow me? Yeah. But anyways, that's another thing,
watch
right?
Some of those, we need to watch some of those mafia movies just to get some tips on how to move around with serious cash. So watch Breaking Bad again. Man, there's just bad people out there. I've got a buddy that's in the FBI, and he actually works in the digital cyber crimes unit. And we had dinner the other night, and he was kind of telling us about, just some of the crazy dating schemes. And I mean, there's just people out there basically at every turn just trying to figure out how to steal your money. So you just have to really, and I'm really trusting on some of the stuff, but maybe going a little bit more analog, going into the bank and, figuring some of that stuff out will be good. Well, the third article I saw, which, kind of impacts us and people I know, is there's a senator, I think in Wisconsin, trying to introduce a bill. And it's not the first time they've tried to introduce this, but the general theory is, and I'm sure the number would fluctuate depending on how they agree on it, but the general theory is, affordable housing is a problem. And a lot of these big corporations are buying up, dozens and dozens of homes. And it's making it really hard for first-time home buyers and people trying to find affordable housing to find houses. And so let's limit the number of houses that an entity can own. This lady had evidently proposed 15 as the number, which I think is, of course, on the surface, and I guess it depends on who your voters are in that area. That probably sounds amazing. But, 15 homes, when you really start paying attention to serious investors, I mean, that's nothing to some of these people. And they're not these slumlord, oppressive type people. Megan and Dustin, who was on the podcast, own 22 doors over in Abilene. Well, they're just independent. I, figured it out over the course of 5 years, how to do this and this, piece it together, just normal people. Should they be taxed at a higher rate because they own that many doors? I just think it's insane. Now, BlackRock and all these people that are coming in, love George Roddy's story, but the year that they bought 3,200 homes, are we talking about that type of level? Should it be 1,000? Maybe these people that can come in and spend billions of dollars in the course of a few months and impact the overall value of an area really quickly. I guess if that's what they're trying to do, my argument would be, those types of people can operate at a scale that also makes things efficient. And if you have rent, there's also a ton of renters out there who will never afford a home, who don't want a home. And if these people can professionally manage it in a way that's better or more efficient or safer or whatever for these people, then why would we not want that either? So I don't know. What is your take on the 15 home limit for investors?
Obviously it's light. I think that is their goal, right? Is to limit these institution buyers from buying up the property. And it said something about, do you have it up in front of you to see? It said in 2000, the year 2000 versus, recently, like the number.
I don't remember that statistic. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, there was some statistic about showing like the amount of properties owned by investors now versus 2000 is something crazy. Okay.
It says they think it's going to save up to 3 million affordable houses. They think if they put this rule into place, it could open up 3 million units that are affordable to people who
investors still buying about 16% of all homes purchased nationwide in third quarter of 2023, more than double the share bought up by investors in 2000. So basically, 8%, back in 2000, and now about 16% buying in, in 2024 or 2023.
I guess the rub would be, how do you prove, are you beating those buyers out? Now they're going to sit on the sidelines to get the rentals because they just absolutely can't afford it. You could look at it from the flip side, from a seller's perspective. Here comes someone offering full price or close to full price asking. So then they get to walk away with more money. So
it says research published in 2021 found that since 2005, the number of residential properties owned by out-of-state landlords has quadrupled from 1,300 to 6,000. Most of the properties are single-family investments or duplexes. Ohio is another big one, which we need to get my buddy Keith on here, who has a bunch of property in Ohio. He actually built a big portfolio here, like in Louisville, back in like 2008, 9, 10, 11. And then somehow got connected and started buying some stuff up in Ohio.
Yeah. Ohio's really affordable.
And he's got over 100 doors now. But again, he's just
shame on him. Just taking advantage of people in the Midwest, just sitting there trying to live their own life.
The argument is, and I don't know a lot of the details, but I know, like in Europe, for instance, like in London, like it's made it to where it's very difficult for people to be able to buy a home. And so most people are renting a home, right? So I think that's the concern. And you got to think that, an investor offer, as we talk all the time, especially when these institution buyers were buying at pretty heavily, when interest rates were lower, they were very competitive offers, to the market, because they are not only making the numbers work currently, but their idea is what's it going to be in 5 years and how do they gain the appreciation gain out of it. And so they were buying very competitive. Close to retail is what these investors were buying. And again, it was a convenience buy, very simple, very easy, guaranteed close, same as cash. And so, yeah, it's made it tough, over the last couple of years when you're competing against an investor like that. As a consumer buyer, it's made it tougher, to compete. And I think that's probably where this pushback's coming, is just from the independent buyers going, and then you got homeowners too that are seeing the neighbors' homes being bought and rented versus, owned by somebody, and people get frustrated by that. But
yeah. And devil's advocate, I'm sure there's some benefit to it. I'm not going to pretend that there's not any benefit to limiting it, that these huge hedge funds can come in and buy 1,000, 2,000 homes in a certain really short period of time. But the cynic part of it and the precedent part of it is, okay, look at the car market. You have CarMax. They buy 40 cars a day down here in Plano. And, if I wanted to buy a used car, well, they're buying up all the used cars. Or, how do you have all these franchises? You've got McDonald's all over the country. That's, the local hamburger guy can't compete because McDonald's comes in and they take up all the business, and they run, small time people who really want to run a restaurant out of business because, they're this huge corporation that can, operate at scale. So there's businesses all over that operate at scale that are backed by billion-dollar funds, because they can come in and buy things and put their systems in place. And we're okay with it, with franchises and all that stuff. But when someone comes in and does that with homes, it's like, oh no, we can't, because, these people really need to buy an affordable home. Well, maybe someone wanted to buy an affordable business and they can't, because now they can't compete. That's maybe not like the best comparison, but there's basically business that happens all over all the time that's backed by huge, huge funds. And we're not saying, well, that's bad, don't do that. You can't put more money into that community, because we really want the locals to really be able to thrive. So to do that in this industry seems a little bit odd. But again, I think, it could be beneficial, but I think it's also very electable. I think it's really good key point of like, hey, we're really trying to work out affordable housing. We're really trying to work for you to be able to go out and live the American dream. And I think it's just really something good to talk about that it's easy to explain.
Reading a little bit further into this, that one of their goals here is that they would call it Baldwin's tax. And basically the tax would be implemented against people that own, between 16 to 25 doors, and then people who own 26 to 100 doors. So they're saying basically a 3% of purchase price for investors that buy 16 to 25, and then 5% purchase number or 5% tax, I guess, on people that own 26 to 100 properties.
And we're supposed to trust the local government to take that extra 3%, put it in some bank account, open up a grant system, and offer that money to other first-time home buyers as some sort of down payment assistance. Yeah, basically they're talking about splitting it between a housing trust fund and a capital magnet fund that could build or rehabilitate over 300,000 housing and for extremely low income Americans to help finance 2.7 million units. Yeah, I think what you're saying, it's all like a push for the local government to manage this grant program to give back to homeowners and people that are in a bad spot, and then the government gives out this Yeah, I'm sure that'll go well. I'm sure there'll be no fraud, no odd things going on when you give the government just millions of dollars just to try to figure out how to spend it.
And how are they really going to know? I mean, when you have multiple entities, how are they really going to know?
LLCs, right? Yeah,
I don't know.
I just think it's ridiculous. All right, let's move on to our real estate topic. I think this is a good one. We're not going to. I think we actually might make this a real estate university episode here soon, but. We came up with we were talking about this Canyon Creek property that we walked the other day, and there was just this real disconnect between what we felt like the value of the house was and what the homeowners thought. And so we came up with a really, really snappy 4 L's that really impact a seller's value of their house that a lot of times they overlook. And so number one, of course, everyone talks about location. Well, number one is location, but maybe not so much how you're thinking. So let's just quickly dive into the factors of location when it comes to selling your house. Now, this could be retail, but also could be to, selling to an investor. So these are the things that people really just should pay attention to and be realistic about. And hopefully the agent that's working with you to list your house has this conversation with you to sort of give you a nice snapshot of what your property might be worth. So when it comes to location, of course, one of the main things that I dealt with on Mapleton and this Canyon Creek house was on Custer is the street. So being on a busy street, no bueno.
Yeah. And again, mind you that the way we have to think about properties is we work backwards from the top side. And so the top side is usually a lot of the argument, and that's where things begin, because people have an unrealistic idea of what that value could potentially be. And when you know these things, starting with location, you have to put a cap on that top of the value and say, okay, we have to start here and then work backwards. And, when you have the untrained homeowner or even the agents in some cases, if they're just using dollar per foot as a comparison, and they're looking at it as a whole and just going, oh, look, some of these houses, and this was a golf course community. Of course, the golf course houses, somebody may be buying it, tearing it down for $600,000-$700,000 and then building a, $2.5 million home on it. And so that skews the numbers. People just have no idea on the comparison when they're looking at, what their existing home is and what it could be worth. And they have this unrealistic idea. And then you have the tax assessed values that, in this particular case, we saw a heavy reverse mortgage on this property. And then the tax assessed value was extremely high for the property, unfortunately. And that to them set the value of the property, right? Which is totally incorrect, because our ARV was only about $100,000 higher than what the tax assessed value was. But in their mind, that, the tax assessed value was the value of the property essentially, right? But so going into location, the big thing about location is we talk about location. That's a geographical location. What's the demand in that pocket? This particular pocket, it has a division between elementary schools and actually two different districts all in the same neighborhood, and one creates more demand than the other. So you have to kind of dissect that. That's more of that geographical demand, as what's going on in that pocket and what's the driving factor, and how do you dissect between the different values. And then you have the actual physical location. In this particular case, this was on an extremely busy street, and therefore is going to take a hit. You're going to have people that are going to offer you a percentage amount lower than something that's on an interior lot because of being on that busy street. It's hard to park. It's hard to pull in and out of your driveway. All these different things are a main factor. And this was a very popular street, very well known. So it already has a stigma. As soon as you put that address out on MLS, people are going to push back on it because knowing the address, right? Knowing the street name. So therefore, it's going to limit that ability to push that value up. Now, if you really do it well and you get the right person in the door and they want to pay more than the other guy, okay, great. But you can't bet on that, right? And then you have other things. So busy street is one of them. And you actually see this deducted in appraisals. If you guys are out there, look at your appraisals that your buyers are getting on properties they buy. See if you can get a copy of it. Just study them. The more that you study these appraisers, the more you'll understand how values work, and that it's a lot more involved than just looking at a dollar per foot number. And, the other factor would be,
we talked about power lines.
Yeah, what it backs to, right? So like it's a catch-22, as we were talking about off air. You could back to this jogging trail, which is really nice. It's cool. You got a green belt, but the green belt has these big giant power lines. They don't necessarily bother me too much, but they bother a lot of people. And not only, we've talked about this before, how many different ways are you selling the property? You're selling it 4 different ways. You're selling it to the buyer, the buyer's agent, the inspector, and the appraiser. So one of those people are going to have a problem with it, right? Whether it's the buyer's agent or somebody's going to point it out. And the main reason that we as agents will point out things like this is to let the buyer know that they may be challenged with this in the future. It may not bother them now. I mean, how many times have you gone into a listing appointment with a property that backs to a busy road, or it sides to a busy street, or it backs to apartments, or it backs to commercial, and the homeowner that owns the home goes, "Oh, I love it. It's quiet. I've got no issues. Like, I back to commercial, no big deal. I got no neighbors looking in my backyard. It doesn't bother me. I love it." Okay, great. But somebody else may not. Right. And they may have the stigma before they walk in the door. And so it's just important that you always have these conversations with that owner that, hey, later when you call me to sell it and I tell you we've got to price it $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 less than what your neighbor sold for across the street, and you get mad at me, I'm telling you now that we're going to have that challenge, right? Like that, we just have to prepare for it. And if you prepare for it and we buy it right now, it's not a big deal. Okay.
Yep,
so
for sure.
That's location.
Number 2L, life expectancy. So there's units, there's systems in the house that, we look at, and you have your electrical, your plumbing, your air, your roof, your foundation. So these are huge, systems that are going to be there. Now, the foundation doesn't necessarily have a life expectancy. It could shift, but your roof does, your air units do, your electrical does, and your plumbing does. And specifically, like this house that we bid on over in Richardson, and a lot of the houses that Tavis is bidding on right now in Plano, I think you said probably 25 to 50% of the houses in Plano, pretty much it's just the part of town that was built, pre-1980, mostly in the mid-70s, late 60s in these areas. They have cast iron plumbing, and there's just a life expectancy to cast iron. It's sitting in moist clay for years and years and years. It's being used, and at some point it will fail. And so the lifespan of these systems has to be taken into account. And so talk a little bit about, I know this Canyon Creek one had this issue as well, and it was their electrical was the issue there.
Yeah. Because I believe that home was pier and beam, and they had already changed a lot of the cast iron, I believe, to PVC underneath the home. So that does help. Statistically, working under a pier and beam home, changing out cast iron to PVC is obviously much less or much more affordable than, working with a slab home. So that's another thing to, be aware of. If it's a slab home, you're digging and tunneling, and it's very expensive. It's, hundreds of dollars per foot, per linear foot that you're digging and tunneling under a home to change it out. So, yeah, but the things that we were looking at was, when you have pier and beam, you also have to look at how many years has this water been leaking on that floor in a bathroom, or, the water line to the fridge that was, hidden behind the fridge. You couldn't see it, but when we walked on it, it was squishy. And so not only is subfloor bad, but then you've got stringers and, the structure under the home that needs to be addressed. So that was something that we saw as a big red flag.
That's another thing that the real estate heavyweights could offer as a service. We a little bit heavier. We could just walk pier and beam houses and just like, hey,
it's going to be squishy for us.
Miss Johnson, 115 pounds. You may not realize it, but that floor is a little soft because when we walk in the house, we start finding problems. You're like, heck, you might want to pay attention to that.
The thing that gets me is always 2-story homes. When you walk in that decking on the second floor and it's going,
yeah,
and I'm walking it,
I'm leaving.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, we need to put screws in here, so I'll tell my guys to do it, and then they go up there. We're like, we can't find any squeaky, and I'm like, hold on, let me walk. Let me do it. It's squeaking. I'm telling you,
that's a great service we could offer.
Yeah,
that's great.
So. No, at electrical panels, I mean, there's several different brands out there that have been discontinued that are going to get flagged on the back end inspections. And one of the big tell-alls is just that, if where the panel's located. So back in the day, panels out of convenience were in master closets a lot of time, right? Or in bedroom closets. Out of the way, but they soon realized that was a fire hazard. If you had a breaker that failed and sparked and tripped, and you had a bunch of clothes in there, it didn't take much for all that stuff to ignite and catch on fire, burn your house down. So, that they've changed that code now. So those panels need to be, if it's in a closet and you need to keep all the home runs in the same location, you need to move the panel to the outside. It needs to be a waterproof panel, etc. But yeah, those are all different life expectancies that you and I were walking and just kind of ticking it up and going, okay, yeah, panel's old, needs to be changed. Not a big deal. We can still buy the house, but we got to take that into account. HVAC systems, how old are they? How old is the roof? Roof looked okay, but it was, plus 10 years. Most likely it's going to get flagged in today's day and age, even though it's got a 30-year shingle. Every inspector in the brother right now is flagging a roof that's more than 5 years old. You do a major renovation on this home, most likely it's going to get flagged. You need to kind of plan ahead, so we're just kind of checking the boxes as we're going through. And, that's what we're talking about with life expectancy is you kind of got to know things that even though that they're performing as designed, if you're buying the home as an investment, you're most likely going to have to go ahead and change them out. If you're buying it for your personal home, you can tolerate it and then deal with it, when those things fail. But if you're buying it as an investor, you need to probably plan on going ahead and changing those things out during the project.
Yep. So number 3, we'll kind of go through these a little quicker. Number 3 is the lot. So this one over in Canyon Creek had almost a half acre, but it was on the busy street. It was a corner of a cul-de-sac, kind of a funky lot. And, on paper, it's like, wow, it's huge, but the setback, setbacks are sort of these legal requirements by cities that say you have to have this much distance from the street and the sidewalk and all the different setbacks that were obviously in play at this house. And then, the backyard had a pool and it was, it was kind of pushed back towards the back of the property though. So the backyard itself wasn't that big. The front yard was pretty large, but then again, you're right on this really busy street. So they're advertising, well, it's almost half acre. Well, and it's a 1-story house, ranch style type house. It kind of spread out over the lot. And like, well, that's great, but there's just not a whole lot usable here. And so when you're considering selling your house, you really need to consider, what kind of lot do I have? Do I have a 40-foot lot, 50-foot, 60, 70? Is this a wedge corner that I can really really market and say, hey, this is actually different. This is a great backyard, and really lean on that? Or is this lot, kind of funky, and you're going to have to fight that layout every time someone comes and looks at it and they kind of walk outside like, this is a little different than the pictures. I'm not really sure about that. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something you have to take into consideration.
Yeah. And then obviously the topography to the lot too matters, right? So you could have a really big lot, but it you could have like an acre lot, and the usability of your lot is a tenth, right? It could be 0.10 that's actual usable because the back of your lot drops off 500 feet down a mountain,
Right.
And so there's things like that you have to be aware of, and you can't just look at the paper, value. But that home we walked in, and one of the first things out of the homeowner's mouth was, "Oh, this is a great lot. Did you see how big this is? This is 0.44 of an acre." Yeah. And we walk out in the backyard, and it's like almost like your typical Plano house. You walk outside, right. It's got mostly all pool, very little bit of yard. And
all
that was
pool, all neighbors fence. That's what you can see,
And that was, that was your backyard. And so that's what you run into that people don't think about. And the other part is, and I think this might go into your next thing about layout and floor plan, but the issue with that particular home is the garage was all the way on the left side of the home where the extra lot size was. And then you're like, well, how do you use that side of the space, right? How do you, if you do close that in and you do expand in working with this existing home, how do we even make that attractive? Because you've got a garage that's blocking everything from accessing into the house. So it's another thing to think about, but let's go on to the next one.
Next one, like Tavis said, number 4, layout. So big deal. The open house I did on Sunday, all the bedrooms were upstairs and the laundry was upstairs. And oddly enough, not a ton of people who came through mentioned this as sort of a problem. But in general, I would say, if you don't have any bedrooms downstairs and if the laundry's upstairs, these are going to be layout issues. They're going to be a problem. And if you have a house that's kind of winding, funky, you got to go through this room to get to that bedroom. You got to be really creative about ingress and egress of like, how am I even supposed to use I've got to go through the master bedroom to get to the laundry room, things like that. Not to mention, just style of, hey, I really like more of an open concept. This house is really closed off, or this house is way too blown out. I want some more walls. When you have layout issues, you might get used to them, and it might make all the sense in the world for your family to have, 3 living rooms, one for everybody. But someone else coming in there might say, like, I'm not even really sure what I'm supposed to do with this room. There's not a closet in here. I can't make it a bedroom. It's right off the entryway. I'm going to have to put a wall up here to make it. Like, they have to, like, the minute they start walking in the house, they start having to get creative about how would I do this? How would I do that? And the more you can avoid that, the better. And, this house, the layout was actually decent on this specific house. I would say the downside for this from a layout perspective is really just a construction. They had a lot of the sunken living rooms, that sort of thing. It's not really a layout thing, but, just the actual interior design of a house, the layout of that stuff really can play a role. And if you're having to explain things to people, that's a downside. And you need to take that into consideration when you're coming up with the price for the listing.
Yeah, if people are walking in and scratching their head, that's something I always kind of use as a term, right? If you're scratching your head and going, what are we doing here? What's the space? What is this for? Staging can help with that in a simple home. We talked about staging earlier. That can really help, with that situation because it identifies what that space is actually used for. I'll double back on something you said regarding the floor plan. So, having all bedrooms up and everything else. So the caveat to that is make sure you study what's going on in the neighborhood. If it's a neighborhood in an area or a subdivision that all bedrooms are up, then that's not a bad thing. Right? Because that's what you get for your money. That's the subdivision. That's the area you're looking. There's like huge subdivisions and things like that built out in Fort Worth. And that's how all the floor plans are. Like all the bedrooms are up. If you ever have spent time up in the Northeast at all, or the northern part of the United States, a lot of homes up there, all master bedroom and all bedrooms are up and living quarters are down. It's just the way homes are built. So here in Texas, along the way, you've got a lot of one-story ranch-style homes, and so people have gotten used to having all bedrooms and living quarters on the same level. And if it goes into a two-story home, then they've gotten into, well, let's put the master quarters down, and then let's put secondary bedrooms up. And so we've gotten used to that, but other parts of the country don't operate that way. Again, it goes back to just looking at what your competition is, and are you the oddball where everybody has a master down and you have the master up? Then you need to adjust. If you're in a situation where everybody has masters up and bedrooms up, okay, great. Just make sure you're comping to those specific things. And so that's something to just be aware of. That's not necessarily always a bad thing, but you have to make sure you've got something to connect to.
Definitely. Well, that was a long conversation on the 4 L's. It's just some groundbreaking information here on when you're selling your home you need to consider. But I think it is really great because we just went through that with this person, and it really does come into play all the time. Some of these things that we consider, especially from an investment side, that sellers may or may not consider. So definitely thank you so much for listening today. It's run a little bit long. Please share this with a friend. We are approaching 1,000 downloads, which, is the first milestone for this podcast. We're getting super, super close. So honestly, this podcast or the next one might break that. So do us a favor, try to share this with a few extra people this time. Share it, give us a review, try to get us over that 1,000 download mark, and it make me feel good, make me happy for the day, for nothing else, just do it for that. So you can find me on Instagram, Dallas Real Estate Guy. I'm on Facebook, posting all the time about activity I'm doing. If you are out there looking for investment homes, I'm on the MLS a ton lately. I'm trying to find rentals for a few folks, or we just found a midterm rental for someone. So I'm happy to scour the MLS, try to help you out. I know Tavis is out there, bidding on houses left and right, trying to find another flip. He's finishing up Wiley soon. I would love to get into a flip here soon. So if you have something that's not MLS appropriate and you think would be better to be sold cash, kind of quickly, definitely give us a call. Tavis would do a great job to come out and kind of explain the whole process to you, how to come up with these numbers. And so please reach out to us there. Tavis can be found on Instagram, Facebook, Tavis Westbrook, Travis without the R. Tavis Westbrook Designs, if you need blueprints, design work, 3D renderings, all that stuff, also very doable. So until next time, hopefully we're going to come up with another interview here soon. We're going to find some brilliant person in Dallas to interview. Maybe your friend that has stuff up in Ohio. That'd be awesome. And we will come with you with another interview here soon. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.